Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. And we're live with Justin Bocock. Welcome and thank you for your many, many years of service. We really appreciate it. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you very much.
I'm really excited to talk. I'm really excited to be in touch. So you had 22 years in or over 22 years combined federal and local um, law enforcement career, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you want to tell me a little bit about how that started and how you got into it?
Yeah. I really fell into law enforcement. It just kind of happened. So I graduated. I was born in Tucson, Arizona, and I graduated high school. And college really wasn't going to be my thing, so I decided to join the Air Force. Well, I ended up being an aircraft mechanic on large cargo airplanes, C-141Bs, at McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey. And part of what we did there was we transported the limos for presidential visits.
Cool.
So that's how I found out about a thing called the Secret Service Uniform Division. So I did 4 years in the Air Force, and I got out after 4 years. And I actually got a job working in Seattle, where I did heavy maintenance on United aircraft.
Mhm.
And before that, I started applying with the United States Secret Service Uniform Division. But it
And
took
what
about
is that?
the uniform division. So
Yeah.
the uniform division is basically, and I didn't know what it was either until I talked to them. They basically secure the property. So agents will secure the people, and uniform division, we were responsible for like the residence, the motorcade when it stops. If they go to a hotel, we'll secure that hotel. If you've ever
Mhm.
been to a presidential event and you go through the magnetometers in the
Mhm.
beginning, so stuff that look for metal and weapons and things like that, that's what uniform division does. And we
Gotcha.
also wore uniforms. If you
Gotcha.
ever go to the White House and you see people with white shirts and a presidential seal on their arm and black pants, that's
Mhm.
uniform division.
Excellent.
And it took 3 years to get the security clearance for the job. So I was out of the military for a year and a half living in Seattle working on airplanes. And I got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they said, hey, the academy starts in 2 weeks. We want you to be there. And we need a yes or no right now. So
Yeah.
of course I said yes, yes, and I packed my stuff up and drove to Washington D.C., where I went through the Secret Service Academy, graduated from there, and I was assigned to the Naval Observatory, which is the official residence of the Vice President. And at the
Cool.
time, that was Al Gore. I'm dating myself a little bit, but
Okay.
so I would watch Al Gore's house
Mhm.
when he was there. I did that for about a year and a half. Secret Service Uniform Division was awesome. Great training. It was a lot of
What
fun.
was the training like? Can you tell me about the training?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was. So you start your training in Beltsville, Maryland, and then you go down to FLETC, which is a federal law enforcement training center in Glencoe, Georgia. You go
Okay.
down there for 20 weeks and you get certified as a federal police officer. And
Mhm.
basically, down there, you learn how to be a police officer. We learned the laws, the federal laws, what we can and cannot do, how to arrest somebody. It's basically like a police academy.
Yeah.
We even went through scenarios where it was like a domestic violence call, and you
Yeah.
get called to it, and you had to figure out how, you and your partner had to figure out how to manage this situation.
Mhm.
They taught us driving, obviously shooting, did a
Cool.
lot of firearm stuff, but it was your
Mhm.
basic police type training. So after you graduate that academy, you go back to Washington D.C. or the Secret Service Academy is actually in Beltsville, Maryland,
Mhm.
and there we got specialized training where it was, and honestly, we did a lot of PT, a lot of physical training. We did a lot of running. We did water survival stuff, and it was all centered around protecting the person. So they would have a dummy that would be the same height and weight as
Cool.
Bill Clinton. He was the
Yeah.
president at the time, and it would be like, okay, you're in a burning building, get him out.
Yeah.
Figure out as a team how to get him out of the building. So
Cool.
we have to do all these things. It was a lot of team building, and it was great training. I mean, we learned so many team building things and basic EMT stuff and obviously firearms. And
Yeah.
it was really really good training. But your job is you're training for the thing that you hope never happens,
Right.
right? you're training for that thing that hopefully never happens. And when I got to the Naval Observatory, it was really boring. It was really boring. I'm not even gonna lie. It was really boring. It's a lot of sitting around, and I'm like, and everybody I saw, I was still in academy mode. So somebody would walk by. It's a public
Yeah.
roadway right by the Naval Observatory there on Massachusetts Avenue, and they're walking by, and I'm watching them intently. Got the binoculars, and nothing ever happens. And I'm not saying I wanted things to happen,
Sure, sure.
but you go through, 40 plus weeks of training. You want to do your job. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm ready. Like I've been in the scenarios where a guy pops out with an AK-47 and shoots paintball rounds at me. I'm ready. I'm ready to do this.
Have you
So
have
yeah,
you, have you remained vigilant? Do they train you how to remain vigilant because they know that it's likely going to be boring 98% of the time or something like that?
yeah, absolutely. And they do that in the scenarios. So when I said the AK-47, they obviously didn't shoot real guns at us, but everybody's probably heard of it now. It's called simunitions, and it's
Hmm.
basically it looks just like a bullet. It has a very small amount of gunpowder, but it has a little paint on the end, and you
Hmm.
can actually put it into regular guns. So we
Wow.
would carry our regular handgun. They would carry the bad guys would carry AK-47s or AR-15s or something a lot heavier than what we had because we mainly carried handguns. And they would say, we would have scenarios where they would just simply say, I want you to walk down the street and you're going to lunch. You and your partner, you're on break, walk down the street, go to lunch.
Hmm.
And we're in a controlled environment on the Secret Service Training Academy, which they have like a 3 block city that they built there. And some scenarios, you walk down the street and your hand on gun, they're like, are you gonna walk down the street with your hand on your gun? You know what I mean? You're in DC, you're going to lunch. Just
Sure.
walk, go to lunch. There are some times where you would go and nothing would happen. You would just walk to lunch and you'd walk in the door and they go, break, scenario's over. And you're kind of like, well, what is that? Because like not every situation is bad. But there's other
Mm.
times where they would say, just walk to lunch.
Yeah.
And you're walking down, and all of a sudden, literally, one scenario that I had is a bank robbery occurred right in front of us.
Mhm.
Two trucks come out, people come out, automatic weapons,
Whoa.
and they're like, and the instructor's behind you, like, a bank robbery's happening. What do you do? And like, well, I guess we get involved. We're uniformed police officers. We have jurisdiction. We have handguns. Let's get involved. And you get into a gunfight with people with machine guns. So your simple lunch turned into something horrific. Um, that's how they train you to be vigilant.
Right.
And it's the same thing in the police department because that's the same thing. It's 90% boredom, 10% sheer terror. Is
Right.
you always have to prepare and think for the worst. So you'll always be thinking about the worst. And if you're
Mhm.
always thinking about the worst, if it happens, you're really not surprised. You're really not
Yeah.
shocked. So we would always go to lunch in DC. We'd walk around, and you'd always think like, "Hey, that black car that just stopped, take it out. What are you going to do?" Like, "Oh, I'm going to take
Yeah.
cover over here, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that." Like they already have a game plan. So that's kind of how they train you on that.
That's cool. That's cool. Do they have a high turnover rate because of the reasons that you left also? Or is it, or, from your experience at least, or do people tend to stick around and stay there for a long time?
From my experience, yes. From my graduating class, there's very few people that were in there. We all kind of because it is something where you don't need a college degree to
Mhm.
get into the uniform division. You just need
Yeah.
a high school diploma or military experience. So
Hmm.
I had the military experience. I left and went to a local police department, ended up going to college there and kind of moving on there. A lot of people that I still keep in contact with, they went to like NYPD, Boston Police Department. I have two
Yeah.
friends who went to the FBI, one to the DEA. A couple of them got their degrees and then transferred over to the agent side of
Hmm.
the Secret Service. So
Cool.
it's kind of a good stepping stone. So when I was there, I don't know what it is now. When I was
Yeah.
there, it was kind of a high turnover rate because it was kind of a stepping stone to get yourself into the federal service. Where
Right.
you can kind of get an idea of it, you get the training, get a name for yourself, get a
Yeah.
reputation, learn about how the federal government works, and that helps you get other jobs.
I was going to say the amount of training, the amount of money and effort they put into training you to just have people leave on average after, a couple of years feels a little crazy. But I guess the thing you're getting trained in is applicable for the rest of your life anyway, especially if they figure that a lot of people will just be rotating to other kind of law enforcement or government roles.
Yeah, I don't know the exacts of it, but that would
Sure.
make sense because it did take
Yeah.
a lot. I mean, I was a low level dude,
Yeah.
but it did take. I imagine our training cost a lot of money. But like
Mhm.
you said, very few people are going to go through that kind of training because it took amount of commitment to do that. Like you had to
Yeah.
say, "I want to be here," because they put you through the ringer mentally and physically, and then test. If you failed to test, you were out. So I mean, it the people who did it really wanted to be there. I don't know anybody that I have ever heard of that I know of that went
Mhm.
through all that and then just said, you know what, I'm going to go work at the Safeway and work in the grocery store. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they, they kind of stayed within federal or within law enforcement as a whole. So yeah, it's kind of a
Yeah,
yeah. I
I
think it
appreciate
kind
the
of
Snoopy reference. For
yeah
everyone on the East Coast, they won't get that, but I don't
yes
think. Yeah, but I appreciate that. That's very funny. Um, but I see. So after year and a half, you decided to go local.
yeah. So again, I just happened across. I was at the White House. Al Gore had gone to the White House for a meeting, and
Hmm.
I was in the motorcade part, so we went over there, and I was just hanging out protecting the motorcade, and someone said, "Hey, you're from Arizona. There's a guy from Mesa, Arizona, Mesa Police Department. Have you ever heard of him?"
Hmm.
I was like, "Mesa's a small little town in
Yeah.
outside of Phoenix."
Hmm.
Um, so I ended up just talking to him, and he was really cool. He's like, "We're a growing police agency, and we have this and that, and we're getting a lot of new equipment and all that." I'm like, you know what? I'll go ahead and apply. This was 2000, so I
Hmm.
applied, and I actually ended up getting a call and ended up getting the job in early 2000, February of 2001.
Hmm.
So I ended up leaving right after the inauguration in 2001 of Washington D.C.
Hmm.
And I went back to Arizona. And I loved the
Hmm.
Secret Service and it was great. Like I said, it was boring. I didn't have a lot of friends in like the D.C. area, so I
Yeah, what
kind
was
of
living in DC like? Did you like it?
being from Arizona where
Hmm.
it's not big city. It
Yeah.
was really hard for me to get used to the big city.
Yeah.
Um, and I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, but it was, yeah, like everything is hustle bustle. Everything is kind of who are your parents, like, oh, or what
Hmm.
school what school did you go to? And,
Hmm.
and what degree do you have in here? And people are like, oh, I'm from Arizona. Oh yeah, I don't know anybody from Arizona. It's
Yeah.
like, it's kind of, if you've ever been to DC, you kind of know that most people in DC are all from DC.
Yeah.
Even though
That's
it's
a
a melting pot.
stereotype, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of weird. So I was a young person. I was in my mid 20s, and I really had just kind of, I socially just kind of wasn't fitting in. So I was like, you know what?
Hmm.
Maybe maybe I'll head back west. So I went
Probably
to
a better way
Arizona.
to live anyway, by the way.
Uh-huh.
It's a better lifestyle, I think, living in Arizona than living in DC for sure.
Yeah, and I've been back to DC since then, and
Yeah.
it's cool. Like it was a lot of fun. But yeah, you're right. Like, the cost
It's a
of
place to
living is a
visit.
lot
It's a
less,
place to
but
visit. It's a place to check into. I don't know
yeah.
about, living there for, especially lifestyle, long term. I mean, I don't know many people that stick around DC forever. They find a suburb or they go
Yeah.
to, somewhere else. So you headed back to Mesa, Arizona.
Yeah. So I come to Mesa, Arizona, go through the academy there, police officer. So I do uniform police officer for about 6 years on the streets. I'm a
Hmm.
field training officer for a couple of those years, so I'm training new officers in it, and I loved the police work. So when I was in the Secret Service, a year and a half there, I pulled my firearm twice
Okay.
in the line of duty. Like, for training, it
Yes.
was all the time. But in actual real life, I had to draw my firearm and give commands twice. My first day on the street after graduating the academy, I had already pointed my gun at like four people and arrested, five
No
people.
way.
Yeah,
What's the
local
difference?
policing was so much different than, you know, than the uniform division. It was
Yeah.
way more fast paced, way more, I would say exciting because it is, it's kind of exciting
Mhm.
when you're a young guy. It's exciting. Now I would be like, I'm not doing that. But
Yeah.
yeah, when I was young, so I was like, I really enjoyed it. And
Right.
it was fun doing the street level policing. It was a lot of fun getting out there and just interacting with the people and helping the community. Some days you really felt like you help people out. You're like, I really helped that community this week. I really did a good job on that. Um, but I really started liking investigations as well. I liked
Hmm.
getting a case and being able to run with it, but you can only go so far as a patrol officer because you have to, answer 911 calls and you have to cover your area.
Hmm.
So you really couldn't do all that. So I applied for detectives in 2012. no, 2007. Sorry, 2007. I
Okay.
applied for detectives and ended up getting. I tested into the detective role, and I started out on the graveyard shift, and I was the beer run detective. So I handled beer runs, and so it was
Really?
yeah. So that's how you start. You start out
Okay.
at the very bottom. So like beer
What's
run
that like?
happens.
What's a beer run detective do?
So it's very so it's a I say it's simple, but so you get so a beer run happens, right? And it's all on video. So
Hmm.
then you would look for distinguishing marks like tattoos, things like that. I would look up other cases and see if somebody matching that description was possibly in that area doing other crimes.
Okay.
And then I would get possibly like investigative leads, create a photo lineup. So I'd make, where you have six pictures
Sure, sure.
of, and five, five of them are not the person and one is. And I'd go to the clerks and I'd show them that we're on duty at the time. And I'd show them the photo lineup and say, hey, do you recognize anybody? And sometimes they go, yeah, that dude right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy that came in and, grabbed two things and ran out the door.
Hmm.
So then I would do the follow up and I'd go and knock on their door. In Arizona, that's a misdemeanor.
Okay.
So it's a ticket. It's not an
Yeah.
arrest. So I would literally knock on their door and be like, "Hey, are you so and so?" And yeah, well, on this date and time, you stole some beer from the Circle K. And a lot of times they're like,
Wow.
"Yeah, yeah." How'd you catch me? Well, it's on video. And then I'm like, "Can I see some ID?" And here's your ticket. It's a misdemeanor theft.
Wow.
Go to court in 10 days, and that kind of thing. And that's how I started out. And then
I
one
think you get a
night,
lot of experience like that though, no? You really learn how to work with people and you really learn how to really, I guess, you really get your feet wet, you know?
yes, and it's like everything. You have to start small. So by doing that, you learn how to go through video. You learn how to do research on things. You learn how to look
Hmm.
up other calls for service and try to link cases together. You learn how to
Hmm.
make photo lineups.
Hmm.
Um, you also learn that sometimes these guys, sometimes you look at it and you identify a person and you find out that they have a threat risk to them, like they're on
Hmm.
parole or
Yeah.
they've shot at cops before or they've been arrested for violent. So then you have to start thinking, okay, this isn't just a knock on the door. Maybe I
Sure.
should get a couple other detectives and we need to put our bulletproof vest on and go knock on. This isn't just a suit and tie knock. This is an
Right.
actual. Maybe we should approach it a little bit differently. So it does. It gets your feet wet, ready for the big ones. I always say everything we do is training us for the next big one, and that's
Yeah.
that mentality from the Secret Service. You always got to be ready for when the big one happens.
Hmm.
Um, and one night I was the only detective on duty in my division. It was like 3 in the morning, and I hear on the radio a hot call comes out, and it's a shooting. Guy gets shot, and he's laying in the middle of the street. Suspects running, this and that. And they call me because they say, "Hey, we called the on-call detectives. They're not coming out." They said, "You got it." And like you got it. I'm like, "Yeah, I got it. I got it, Sarge. I got this. I got this." So I'm like, I'm gonna be a real detective now. So I
Yeah.
leave my desk at my beer runs and I go out and yeah. So I got involved in an aggravated assault or a shooting case, and I did a lot of work that first night, and I ended up identifying a suspect. And then the next morning, I got a couple hours sleep. Next morning, the day
Hmm.
shift detectives came in. The real detectives, and
Sure.
I worked with the violent crime guys, and I said, "Hey, this is what I got. This is my game plan." And they're like, "Dude, great game plan. Let's make it happen." And we got the guy in custody that afternoon, and that's when I fell in love with violent crimes. I'm like,
Yeah.
"That's what I want to do. Like, I want to do violent crimes." So I
Was there a
started
lot of
working.
that where you were? What's
Um,
Mesa, Arizona like? Like,
so
is that
Mesa, Arizona. So at the time, so it's a suburb of Phoenix. So if you always have like a big city and then like little towns all around it.
sure. Yeah.
Right next to Phoenix is Tempe,
Hmm.
and that's where the Arizona State University is.
Sure.
And
And
then
a lot of
right
good
next to
music concerts are there too. Great,
yeah,
great, great
exactly.
bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's like the
Yeah.
nightlife. That's like the
Yeah.
nightlife. And then right next to that is Mesa. So at
Hmm.
the time, it's grown a lot since then. But back in the early 2000s, Mesa had a population of about 450,000.
Hmm.
Our police department was about 750 police officers. So it was a fairly big area.
Yeah.
I worked the central area, which was the downtown area and also the
Hmm.
high crime area. That's where I
Yeah.
did all my
Yeah. Most
training.
downtowns are high crime, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of gang areas. We had little pockets of badness, and I liked the central area. The further out you went, it got more residential. It got more business. We
Hmm.
actually have an international airport in Mesa. So on the
Yeah.
very extremes of it, you have the airport, but there it's very mild crime. And
Hmm.
most of the
Right.
crime happened in kind of the downtown area.
Right.
And it wasn't violent, but you had violent acts every
Right.
now and then. You had
Yeah.
robberies, you had shootings, you had stuff like that. A majority of what we did though was, just regular calls for service and domestic violence calls for service, beer runs. There was a lot of beer
Yeah.
runs. Everybody was
Did
stealing
you
beer.
build up relationships with people throughout, like, like, I guess, quote unquote civilians or whatever that would kind of get to know you, or people like in the more high crime area that you'd come to recognize, or was it just constantly just a fluxion of new people?
Oh, that's a great question. No, absolutely. That's how you become a really good cop,
Yeah.
is the community. You can't do it by
Mhm.
yourself. And I did. I had a lot of the cigarette stores and liquor stores that would get
Mhm.
robbed a lot when I was in robbery. I made good connections with those guys and gave them my phone number and said, "Hey, anything suspicious, you call me directly." And they'd
Yeah.
call me about all kinds of stuff, and I'd pass it on. Like they would literally say, "Hey, two guys bought some beer in my store, and then they went out back to drink it." And he goes, I was just sweeping I was sweeping the sidewalk and I overheard him talking about doing a robbery on some guy in the
Mhm.
neighborhood.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, hey, thanks. So we
Awesome.
look at it. We
Awesome.
actually
Right.
we actually were able to prevent a crime, from
Yeah.
doing the whole thing. Yeah, it's all about community. It really is. Um,
Mhm.
and policing has changed a little bit because we used to have what they called the community policing model, where we would rely on the community to give us
Yes.
information. And that's also how we knew we were doing a good job, is when the community
We
approved of
trust
us.
you guys enough to call you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when your
Yeah.
customer says you're doing a good job, you know you're doing a good job. And then about halfway through my career, we changed into the ComStat model, where ComStat actually started in New York. And it was under, I think, Bill Bratton. But it was basically where you use statistics to solve
Mhm.
crime. So basically, you look at a map and say there's a bunch of burglaries in this area. So we're going to put all of our resources in that
Mhm.
area to solve the burglaries, which makes sense. But when you're constantly moving people around, you really just push crime. And if you
Right.
solve crimes in one area, it's still going to happen in another. So you go to the other. We, and when you do that, to determine our success, we saw how our numbers went down. So we were kind of our own customer.
Right.
So we would reduce the numbers and then pat ourselves in the back and say, we're amazing. But we're not getting the buy-in from the community. It's easier, or I think it's more
Yeah.
efficient and better when you have the community telling you you're doing a good
Sure.
job, and not you doing something and then saying, you know what, I'm pretty awesome. I did a good job on that.
I would love to have a local cop that I had a friendly association with, that that I could talk, that we could talk to, about anything. But I feel like associations with cops in general are just so like, oh God, what's this guy gonna give you a ticket for now? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah.
don't like, like. And I really go out of my way to try to be, friendly, or, nice, and even like, wave in the street, wave whatever, just, kind of be nice, have a good day, officer, thanks so much, whatever it is. But I do think that it also helps establish a sense of trust within the community, that like that there's a sense of where we're all working together. We're all like, one crew. It almost feels. I mean, at least growing up in my association with it, it was like, the cops are out to give you tickets, are out to get you,
Yeah, yeah,
and I don't, and I think, and like what you're saying, it's unfortunate that's the case, because everything would really be a lot better if it was a lot more collaborative.
yes. And you're absolutely right. And like I said, I've been a cop.
Yeah.
And we've all been in jobs where there's people who are good in their job and there's people who are bad in their job or not very good at their job. It's the
Sure.
same thing with police officers. I was always the police officer that was very chatty and very friendly.
Hmm.
I'm the guy that's got a story for everything. And if you stopped me on the street and said hello, I'd chat you up and we'd be best
Sure.
friends and shaking hands. And next time I saw you, I'd be like, hey, what's up, Ephraim? How you doing, buddy? And you'd be, hey, Officer Bocock, what's up? Anything good happened today? I'm like, no, I'm just chilling. But there are other cops who are just not like that. And
Hmm.
even we as cops knew who they were. They were just
Yeah.
the sour bunch, and
Right.
sometimes they're the people who would be on the streets forever. Because there's some
Hmm.
cops who don't change areas. They just stay in one spot and just become bitter and angry. And they're even bitter. And if the public would feel any better about it, they're bitter and angry to their coworkers too.
Right.
It's not just the citizens. They're just angry people. And we've all met them. I've been pulled
Hmm.
over by them. I've gotten tickets from them, where, it's just, that's just their personality.
Yeah.
They're just sour people. And that's not just cops. You go anywhere in the world, any business you go into, there's going to be nice people and there's going to be people who just don't like their job. and are just going to
Sure.
be that way. So it is unfortunate that we can't all be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But every
Yeah.
personality is different. You don't, and I asked the other team, you don't want a bunch of me on the police departments because I always said it's just like the military. They always have like I was Air Force, and you
Mhm.
meet a Marine or an Army person, and they're like, "Oh, you didn't carry a gun." That's true, but if it weren't for me, you would have to walk everywhere you went. You know what I mean? Like, so if you wanted to go to war overseas, you had to get on our airplanes and fly over there. We
Sure.
need it, and when I'm overseas, I need Marines and Army to protect my base so I can
Sure.
fix my airplane. We all
Yeah.
have a position. So I was a very, I wouldn't say a lenient cop, but a very understanding cop. If I went to a party call and it's a bunch of kids underage partying, I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, everybody's getting a ticket. I'm going to say,
Mhm.
you got the
Go
cops
home.
called on you. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm going to be cool through this one time. But if I get called again, my boss is going to want me to do something. And I'm going to
Mhm.
pull everybody out and I'm going to do a breathalyzer test. And if you're
Yeah.
under 21 and you have alcohol on you, I am going to give you a ticket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't take my kindness as weakness, but this is your one. A lot of times, like, oh, we're
Sure.
so sorry. We're so sorry. We'll turn the music down. We won't, don't tell my parents, but you just please be cool.
Yeah.
And there are other people who are not, who would show up, and if it was their call, if they would lead on it, and they would say, oh no, I want everybody out. We're giving everybody tickets because they have to learn. And that's
Mhm.
just discretion.
Yeah.
So different officers handle things different ways, but you can't have everybody handle the world like me because people
Right.
would take it. People have taken advantage of me as a cop. I've been nice to people and they have just totally taken advantage of me. And I was like, well, I got, I got duped and I got to go back
Yeah.
around and be like, you duped me. And like, yeah, I did. So everybody has their place, but
What are you gonna do about it? I could never. The problem is, and I guess this is my own little thing. I have too much. I have too hard of a time pushing back against authority to really even consider. Like if you came up to me and you're like, "I'll give you a break," I'm like, "Oh my God, what a hero!" Like I wouldn't think like he had nothing on me anyway. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I don't think like that. But I guess there are plenty of people that do, and so I guess like you said, got to mix and match your personalities that you're dealing with.
yes, yeah, everybody has their puzzle piece that fits into the
Mm.
puzzle that makes it a good puzzle. Um,
Yeah.
but you got to have people like me, but you guys also have to have those hardcore cops. None of us like to deal with them. But
Hmm.
but I'll tell you what, if you're in a hostage situation or a tough situation, that's the
Oh
guy
yeah,
you
you
want.
want them.
You know what I mean?
No.
That's the dude you want, not me, who's like, well, let's talk it out. You want him who's like, no, we're breaking the door in and we're shooting everybody. Like, oh, okay. So,
Yeah. 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 I wanted to ask, and I don't know if you have any experience or know or read anything or know anything about this or personal experience, but what's corruption like within the police world?
that's a great question. So I will say this: East Coast East Coast policing and West Coast policing way
Hmm.
different. So when I was in
Okay.
the Secret Service, um, we were allowed to take free stuff. At least back then. I don't know what their policy is now, but this is back in
What do you mean
1998.
free stuff?
So, like, for example, we would go on details. There was some senator died when I was in, and we ended up going to. We did a detail to Massachusetts where they buried him,
Okay.
and President Clinton went up. He wanted to go to the funeral,
Hmm.
so he's in the funeral, and I was outside uniform division securing the motorcade while he's in the funeral. So we have
Hmm.
to, and there's uniform division, and that was my job was to stand there. And people would come up to the rope line and they'd ask like, "Oh, is that the limo?" Like, "Yep, sure is." And he's your move on. Well, people will come up and say, "Hey, we know who you are. You're Secret Service. Here's some free coffee." You know,
Oh,
and like,
that's nice.
"Oh, thank you very much. Like, I really appreciate that." They're like, "Hey, I'm going to give you guys a box of donuts. Is that okay?" And we're like, "Absolutely, it's okay."
Yeah.
They were completely cool with that. And I'm not saying that that's good or that's bad. That's just how it was.
Sure.
And then when I
Why
came to
wouldn't
the
it be? Why wouldn't it be good? Like I could see if someone came up to you and gave you $500 and was like, "Hey,
yeah,
turn
yeah,
away for a couple of minutes." That's something else than giving you a coffee or a donut. No.
because it could be perceived as some sort of favoritism. So let's say that person that gives us coffee and donuts, let's say later that afternoon they do something where I have to intervene and maybe I have to put them in handcuffs. Like let's say they move their car in front of the motorcade or something along
Hmm.
those lines, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you need to move right now. Oh, I was cool to you. I gave you donuts and you're going to do this to me. It
Hmm.
kind of puts you as the cop in a bad spot.
Right.
Um, so
I hear
yeah, it's
that.
not
Okay,
it's
that's
not
fair.
always the best thing.
Yeah.
Well, in Mesa, They were big. Even in the Mesa Police Academy, they would test you where they would. First off, the Mesa Police Department policy was and still is you don't take anything for free. There is no gratuity at all.
Hmm.
If you find money, you turn it in. They would test us. They had vending machines at the academy. And if you bought something from the vending machine, they would put extra change in there. So if you bought
Wow.
soda for 50 cents, you put $1 in and 50 cents and a penny come out. You have to take that 50 cents and that penny, you have to go to your training officer,
Hmm.
report it, write a report, and turn it in as
Wow.
evidence. If you don't, we actually had a recruit who did it, and they removed him.
Really? Cut him.
They said that's an integrity issue. They're like, our policy is no gratuities.
Wow.
For
Does
example,
that carry over to the actual morale of the officers throughout the years, or is that only for like the training point?
no, it goes on. So it's not just
Oh, it goes
training, but
on.
it goes on,
Right.
and to the point of I don't know if you guys have quick trips. For my West Coast people, there'll be quick trips. A quick trip for my East Coast folk are like a Wawa.
Okay, gotcha.
Those are Wawa is.
Gotcha. That's my language now.
Imagine your local convenient gas station store that cops go to get coffee. Well,
Sure.
Quick Trip in Arizona, they have a corporate policy that cops get free coffee. So what we would have to do is they would give us a free coffee. You would try to pay them, and they're like, "Oh, I get in trouble if I take money." So we would basically just give them the money for the coffee, and then say, "Hey, just buy the person's coffee behind me,
Hmm.
or pay for somebody else's coffee."
Right.
We had to do that because if you didn't, and somebody found out,
Wow.
you could literally be in trouble. You would be fired once you were out of the academy, but after a couple of violations. So
Sure.
this goes to the corruption side. On the East Coast, everybody talks about that thin blue line and how, cops protect cops. I saw
Hmm.
that back east.
I was going to
In
ask about that. Cops protect
Yes, I
cops.
saw
Yeah.
that. I straight up saw that back east. In Arizona, not so much. If you
Really?
screw up, you screw up. You're kind of on your own. Now, has it changed? It definitely changed from in 2000 when I came to Mesa until I retired in 2021. It
Hmm.
had changed a little bit more because we had become a bigger city. We went from 400,000
Sure.
to almost 800,000. We doubled. So we got a
Hmm.
lot, and we got a lot of people from back east. We had some NYPD people come in. And they brought their back east policing with
Vibe with
them
that. Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
hey, no, it's cool to do that. So the paradigm has changed within law enforcement, but I will say East Coast, and I always said East Coast and West Coast law enforcement are extremely different.
Sure.
As for physical corruption, I only heard of it in my department once. The guy got caught, and we all knew he was shady. We all knew it was the officer that always did shady stuff. He always would say, "Hey, hey, come with me to this house because I know that I know right now they have, like 2 kilos of cocaine."
Yeah.
And like, how do you know they have 2 kilos of cocaine? Like, I'm not going with you because this is
But they
weird.
don't think, but they don't call you naive for that. Like I don't like. Do they say like, "Oh, grow up"? Like this is the world, and we're
Yeah,
making
oh,
X amount
absolutely.
of
Yeah,
money, and
those
we're
guys would be like, "Oh, this is how you solve crime. This is how I got the information from a source on the street, and this is how you solve crime." And I remember telling that officer, I was like, I don't want to be involved. Grab somebody else. I don't want to be your backup." Well, then a year later, I was in detectives, and I heard that DEA actually did a sting operation, and they caught that officer. He wasn't
Oh
just getting
man,
information off the street, he was actually helping rival gang members, and they would tell him, "Hey, I know that my rival gang member has drugs. Go bust him for me." And then he
right,
would go, and he was straight corrupt. And you're kind
right.
of like, we all knew that guy was shady. I didn't know he was that corrupt, but he was definitely shady. You know what I mean? Um,
I
and
don't
so
know. Is
police
that
are
bad?
police. Police are that's the only real example that I have of it. But a lot of people think that, and I get how they understand it, like because I've been involved in large scale homicide investigations where
Mhm.
people will management and staff will make public statements and then have to recant those statements or say something different later,
Mhm.
and it looks like they're lying, and it really isn't that way. Like, it really isn't.
They really are
It's a
not
lot of
lying.
times that they just don't know. They just don't know.
I see. I see. I'm sorry. I'm just the reason why I'm holding my phone actually right now is because I you reminded me while we were talking. I did a interview with a DEA agent, super nice guy, Brian. Oh gosh, I'll tell you his name in one second. Brian Townsend, awesome dude. And one thing that he worked throughout the East Coast and through Texas. And one of the things that I had asked him and talked to him about was the relevance of geography on the particular drug trade that he was, trying to catch or prevent. Um, Arizona is a big, Arizona tends to be a big area where drugs go through, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So was I guess, first of all, I'm sure that you saw over the years the increase in drug-related crime. Does that also almost always include an increase in violent crime as well?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. When I was on the streets as a patrol officer, methamphetamine was the thing.
Okay.
And almost all that methamphetamine was coming from Mexico.
Yeah. And how far
Um,
is Mexico from there?
it's about, see, Tucson, so it's probably about 120 miles. So in 2 hours, you
Oh,
could be in Mexico. Like we're
oh, so it's close. I mean, like if someone
very
wanted to
close.
just drive through, they could just drive right. You're one of the first big places they drive through.
Yeah, the first big place you'll drive through is Tucson. That's
Okay.
about 40 minutes away from the
Gotcha.
border. And then after
Mhm.
Tucson is 90 minutes north, kind of in the center of the state, is Phoenix and
Okay.
Mesa area. No, that's why as soon as we had a violent crime like a homicide, and if we had any indication they had Mexican ties, we automatically called Border Patrol and said, hey, look for this guy crossing the border. Because
Right.
by the time we even get on scene, they're halfway to the border if they want to go. So, yeah,
And
we're really close.
do they usually follow through with tips like that? Or do you
Absolutely.
hear back if they follow through with tips? Do they call you back and say, hey, thanks for the tip, that was great? Or do you just read about it in the newspaper and you're like, oh, they caught the guy?
Oh no, no, absolutely no. They'll call us.
Oh, yeah?
So, for instance, if we had a homicide and we have a suspect identified and we believe that he has ties to Mexico and he may be headed to Mexico, we
Hmm.
call the Border Patrol and we say, hey, if he crosses at any one of the things, we want him detained. They will detain him for us, but they're federal officers.
Yes,
So they can
I
only
was gonna
detain
ask you about
him,
that next.
and what'll happen is we'll go down there, and then we'll
Yeah.
actually take custody of them. So now they'll stop them and say, "Hey," and a lot of times they'll just say, "Hey, you're wanted by Mesa PD," and they'll get out and try to run, and then boom, they get handcuffs, and they might get their
Yes.
own federal charges, but yeah, they do the thing. And I will even say, even the Mexican authorities were very helpful because we
Yeah?
would tell our border patrol, and then border patrol would say, "Can we tell the Mexican police on the other side?" And we absolutely. So they
Hmm.
would tell them. So just in case they got past our border patrol, if it and then because when then once you go through ours to get into Mexico, you got to go through Mexican customs.
Sure.
They would know. They never got through our border patrol, but it was always a secondary thing, and they were always more than willing to like, yeah, because we don't want him in our country. You know what I mean? Like if he murdered somebody, we don't want him here. Just we'll absolutely hand him right back to you. But they'll just deny him entry into the country, give him back to border patrol, and then they hand him off to us. So yeah, it's very very cooperative.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So I was going to ask about that because I know that that depending who you talk to, the people say that the federal and the local, I guess coordination could be a little patchy sometimes, or other times it's really wonderful. What's been your experience? What's been your experience working with the federal police as opposed in a local position?
Great. But also, I was in the homicide world, so it's a little different. I think it really depends on the crime. So
Okay.
what we had, and we used the feds almost exclusively. So if we got a murder suspect, so I have a murder, I identify a suspect, I develop probable cause, and I
Okay.
can arrest him.
Okay.
Um, we had a unit in our in Mesa Police Department called the Major Felon Unit. They were Mesa and federal agencies. They had FBI, DEA, they had all the different
Oh,
federal
working
agencies
together.
all working together. So if I
Wow.
had probable cause, I would just go straight to them because the feds, they would get information that we didn't have access to. So if we
Hmm.
had a phone number, the feds could do amazing things with that is classified to the point where as case agent, I didn't even know. They would just
Sure.
say, "We know he's at this address. I can't tell you how I know that, but we're
Yeah.
going there and going to arrest him." And I'm like, "Okay, there's probable cause for arrest, so go for it. You have, if anything goes south, I will vouch that yes, there's a probable cause to arrest this individual," and they would go and get him. So the coordination was amazing
Hmm.
because it was a homicide, and that was good for everybody. Nobody wants a homicide person on the street. Where you get dicey is if the crime is a little questionable. So let's say you had like a custodial interference kidnapping. So it's
Okay.
like a mom and dad are divorced, and then
Hmm.
the dad takes the kid and is holding them for a couple of days longer than he should.
Yeah.
It's a crime, but are you going to have the FBI SWAT team breaking in your door?
No.
You know what I'm saying? That's where people say, oh, the feds and the state don't work real well together because those detectives would go to the feds and say, hey, it is a crime, it is a felony. Can you find the guy? And the feds they're very because again, if they show up there and the guy says, I'm not coming out, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to
Yeah, what
shoot
can you
him
do?
because he kept his kid for a couple of days?
Yeah.
You're going to get the media is going to have a heyday with you. Whereas if you're a murder suspect, it's kind of different. Most society will say, well, I may not like how the arrest went down, but he did murder somebody. You know what I mean? So it
Sure.
really depends on the crime. So being in the homicide world, it was very, people were well more apt to take our cases because it was a homicide and society will buy that better.
Was there any tension in sharing the credit or, trying to take credit to progress careers or anything like that? Meaning if it's a big homicide case and, a bunch of people are involved and you're like, listen, this is a case that could really put me on, could really advance my career and elevate my reputation. Um, and then the feds come, the next thing you read in the newspaper that the feds, caught this guy and you're like, wait a minute. I'm on page 10 of this news story, like did that ever does that get in the way?
Um, it doesn't. It never got in the way with me because I always checked my ego. It
That's
wasn't
good.
about me. It wasn't about me. It was about doing the job. Did
Sure.
it happen? All the time. All the
Right.
time. Because what I did was the boring stuff. Like I'm the one who shows up on the scene. I write the search warrants. I do the administrative stuff. I'm the one going through 1,000 pages of telephone messages and figuring all that stuff out. That's very boring. That's why they don't make
Mhm.
movies about that. Of
Sure.
oh, this guy sat behind a computer for 3 days straight and looked at all the text messages and figured out it was this guy.
Hmm.
That's not the fun stuff. So yeah, as soon as the feds got involved and they would make the arrest, it would always be the FBI, DEA, and the Mesa felon unit arrested this guy for murder. It was
Right.
never, Detective Bocock who
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
who
gotcha.
looked at 30,000 Facebook pages for 3 days and identified the guy,
You should,
caught him.
by the way, you should
So,
get the credit for that because at the end
so
of the day,
we got the credit
if you don't
in
do that, who's going to do it?
we got the credit within our unit, and so we knew that we did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
they knew that we did it. And
Yeah.
sometimes they would even apologize. It'd be like, there was times where one time it wasn't my case, but it was a high profile case. The unit that made the arrest, they got awards from the governor, and the case
Okay.
agent detective didn't. And they totally apologized. They were like, "Dude, we're so sorry." And everybody in our unit was very like, "Hey, we get it, man. It's cool. Like, you
Yeah.
guys still did a really good job. You did a
Yeah.
really good job." And I think by doing that, it was a good working relationship because if we ever needed them, they would go above and beyond. Because I
Sure.
had a great working relationship with those guys. I always had their back on like the administrative side to where if something did go bad, and
Hmm.
sometimes I have had situations where I authorized an arrest. They went to make the arrest and they had to shoot and kill the guy.
Really?
And it went to federal court. And I went to federal court and I said the truth. And I looked right at the jury and I said, I had probable cause for his arrest. And I told this person, this person, this person that there was probable cause for the arrest. You know what I mean?
What's
So
the what's
I take
so
full
what's the legal
responsibility for it.
what's the legal breakdown, I guess, of that case, right? So you write up and you give probable cause for an arrest.
Mhm.
Um, and then the now when you write up the probable cause for arrest, does that obligate you, local police, you or anyone else working with you to go to that person's house, or anyone could go there and use your probable cause as as a method of arrest?
Yes, anybody can use that probable cause. And that's more on the civil side because the shooting itself will be
Right.
judged on the
Yeah.
shooting itself, right? So
Yeah.
in this particular case, they went to arrest him. He pulled a handgun out, he pointed it
Okay.
at him, and then they shot
Okay.
him.
Okay.
So that part would be handled separately. But we got sued civilly because his family
Ah,
said, you never should have been in his house. You never should have been contacting him because he
uh-huh.
wasn't a suspect.
I
And that's
gotcha.
where you have to have that good working relationship where I went and I said, no, we did. And I had to, even though it was a civil deal, I broke down the evidence. This
Sure.
this is the forensic evidence. This is the circumstantial evidence. This is the direct evidence. And I was, multiple days on the stand explaining exactly why they had it. So the jury could say, oh, and in that
Good
case,
for
the
you doing
jury, the
that.
jury did say, they go, yeah, there was probable cause. Like the officers had a reason to go there. Where the family was just saying, oh, you just picked him out of nobody and just showed up at his house and started yelling at him. He was scared. He pulled a
Sure.
gun, and then you shot him. No, 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 no. If he were to have survived that arrest, he would be in prison for murder because we had probable cause. You know what I mean? We had a lot
Hmm.
of evidence that it was him.
Right.
So it's a give and take thing. So they have to trust us to where when I say, "Hey guys, I have probable cause," they have to trust that if it goes bad, that I have
Yeah.
their back, and it's not. I'm not going to go on the stand and go, "Yeah, it was 50-50. You know, it might have been him. I really just wanted to question him. You know what I mean? Like I really just kind of wanted to get his fingerprints and then see where it goes from there. That's not going to fly. Then civilly, we're going to have to pay money to somebody because that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate. So I have to trust them to do the right thing, and they have to trust me that I'm going to do the right thing. And so in that case, we had a good working relationship, but they always stole the credit. It was always the guys. It's always the guys that put the handcuffs on somebody that get the credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not the behind the scenes. You never hear about the forensic people, the person who identified the fingerprints. They never say, hey, the person who identified the fingerprint, they're a hero. Really,
Hmm.
they are. They're the ones who solved the crime. And then they tell us, and we go out and put handcuffs on it, and we're the hero.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I love, that's why I like to, I was never aware until I was aware that there's more to the story. And then as soon as I realized there was more to the story, I became obsessed to learn, with learning about what else went into it. I
yeah,
think that, like when you see a finished product or like, for example, even with Hollywood, like, the example I give is Hollywood, everyone associates a movie with an actor in it, but you don't think about the writer that's putting the words in the actor's mouth. You don't think about the director. You don't think about the team that edited everything or the music supervisor that put the great soundtrack or the great score in there. And you're
right.
like, oh yeah, that movie is amazing because of Leonardo DiCaprio. And you're like, well, yeah, but also like everyone involved was like incredible, and so like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel that that's great, and I think it's beautiful that you appreciated that for what it was rather than letting your ego take over. Because I think it's very easy for a lot of people to get resentful or to get a little bit more like, hey man, like after X amount of time, I probably should have been able to, I should get some credit over here,
Yeah. And on that movie thing, it's great that you bring that up because how many movies have you watched that have um, and I've always said exactly what you said. You have A-list actors that you
Hmm.
consider great actors, but they're in a
Hmm.
movie and it's horrible, and they're
Yeah.
horrible, and you're
Yeah.
like, it's got to be the writing because they're amazing actors, but it's got to be
Hmm.
the writing wasn't very good. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely right. You're only as good as the people who support you, um, but the person who's getting all the credit is the person that you see. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and then
when
they
you said
should
that,
be
that's the first thing I
generous
thought
with
of.
that credit too. They got to
Do
be
what?
generous. They got to be generous with the credit, and they
Yeah.
can't think that they're. The worst thing I think is that when people ultimately think that it gets to their head where they ultimately think, yeah, I am a one man show. Like I can do it all. That's the worst because when they forget that, it's my son, my 2.5-year-old son we watched the movie Cars every day for the last 6 months, and Lightning McQueen is the guy that didn't need the crew, and at the end of the movie, when he gets his whole crew and the whole family together, like that saves the day, and like
Yep.
I love the idea of pushing that kind of concept, especially when in the form of education, to just encourage people to value it. I forgot whether I heard about it, China or Russia, but that one of the two countries, the if you ask, for example, like a high school teacher, like how important is your job, like it's so important. Like I'm raising the people of tomorrow, and then if you ask the mechanic how important his job is, my job is the most important to the motherland, to China because without me, no one can get around. And I feel, and it doesn't feel like we have that kind of those same priorities or values in America the same way at the moment. And I really would love to try to, continue encouraging that people really understand and appreciate, what their place in society is, and that they should be proud of it, and want to contribute and look at it like it's important.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Because I've been on both sides of that. Like as a homicide detective, again, I was
Hmm.
the face of the investigation. But honestly, it was a lot of the forensics, the analysts, the people who made my job easier were the only reason I was able to do my job sometimes. You know,
Sure.
and I was on the other end of it in the Air Force, whereas when we would do a good mission, the pilots, the officers, they took all the credit for everything. If they flew a good mission, they got all the credit for it. But you know what? For every hour of flying, it took, 6 to 7 hours of maintenance. I'm the
Hmm.
guy up all night long, putting air in
Sure.
tires and fixing hydraulics and all that, but no one's ever thanking you. You know what I mean? So I've kind of
Yeah.
been on both sides of that, and I agree 100% that everybody, no matter what you do, um, you are contributing to the greater cause. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people always think, just like you said, like, oh, I got the smallest job, or I'm just a barista, I'm just a custodian, or something like that. No, you don't realize how important your job is sometimes, because if you don't have that, don't have the morning coffee, don't
Mhm.
have the bathroom that works, and see how other people can produce and work. They can't.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Yeah.
work. No, it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good lesson.
Um, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because I happen to love this particular field, but the psychological aspect of being a homicide detective, and either your personal experiences in terms of coping mechanisms, therapy, does the force offer substantial or adequate mental health, because I mean we're not meant to see the things that you see.
Yeah.
I don't think we are, and I think that exposure to this kind of stuff, PTSD is rampant in the country. So what's some of your thoughts or relationship to the mental health aspect of the job?
So Mesa Police Department was really, really progressive in that. They actually have what they call a peer support team. They were one of the first larger agencies to have that.
Hmm.
Um, and I was part of it for a while until I went to violent crimes because I couldn't do both. But
Hmm.
they were very cognizant of it. And we did have counselors on duty that you could see anytime you wanted to, that you could go talk to. A lot of cops just didn't, though. It's kind of that macho, there's still that
Sure.
macho mentality of, I don't need that. I'm stronger. I'm, better. Um, as for the psychology of it, you have to really just be aware of it. I saw in my 8 years of being a homicide detective, and before that, I saw that because even as a patrol officer, we would respond to deaths. And I still remember my first death call. I can still see her face. I still see that.
Hmm.
I was noticing towards the end of my career that I was seeing those early signs of PTSD. I was more
Yeah.
emotional with things. I would cry for, I'd watch a sad movie and I would just kind of tear up. And my son would say, "Hey, are
Hmm.
you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just sad." And I think you have to really recognize it. And once you recognize it, that helps. I've never been a big consumer of alcohol or anything like that, so I never really saw that, but I always paid attention to it. I
Hmm.
always paid attention to, like, hey, if my alcohol starts to increase, I'm going to start talking to somebody. A
Hmm.
lot of cops, unfortunately, don't. And we kind of rely on each other to do it. So within our unit, we really relied on each other. I knew my other detectives when they were having a bad day. And maybe I would say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take that part for you. Why
Yeah.
don't you hang back, get some pizza, and do this part, and I'll go handle the sad part. And in some situations, it would affect me more. And it always
Hmm.
affected people on a personal level. So, like when I dealt with kids that were the same age as my son, it was
Uh,
more to me. So people
yeah.
would step in and say, "Hey, why don't I go ahead and take care of that part, and you go, why don't you go back to the office and write a search warrant?" And I'd be like, "Hey, thanks." And then other people would have situations. We had a female detective. She just had a baby, and we had a
Hmm.
baby death. And we're like, "Hey, why don't you hang back and
Not deal with that.
yeah, and you can do like the phones and the social media part. We'll go out to the scene." And she was like, "Hey, thanks, I got it." We all so you take care of each other. You take care of each other. But yeah, there is a psychological part of it where but you also get desensitized to it. I'm not even gonna lie. You just get
You
desensitized
do,
to it
huh?
because it's your job. And you don't realize it because also it's your job. Like, I've had to dig through brain matter and stuff looking for bullets.
Ugh,
And it's
really?
not, but you don't think about it at the time because you're thinking, I got to find that bullet. Like
Right,
that
but
bullet
but
is
part of
here and I have to
PTSD
find
is
it.
you revisit it.
It's kind of like, you do it and at the time you don't even think about it. It's like 2 days later when you come down and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that was horrible. That was really kind of messed up. So it's kind of when you leave, when you get out of it, is when you start kind of dealing with it and realizing just how messed up the things are. Just like I've never had to shoot anybody, but I've been very close and I've pointed my gun at people. I've taken the slack out of the trigger. I set my
Yeah.
line. I almost did it. At that moment, I didn't. have a whole lot of stress. I was focused on my training. I
Really?
was like, stop, he was coming at me with a knife. And I basically said, stop or I will shoot you. And he's like, no, he's like, and he kept coming. I'm like, stop. And I said, if you cross that line, I'm like, if you cross that curb, I will shoot you and you will die. Do you understand? He's like, no, you won't. Yes, I will. I will shoot you. And he finally gave up. It's only so at the moment, all I thought about was the training. I was
Yeah.
just doing my job. It's almost robotic. And then
Yeah.
when it's
Or
all
you got the
over,
default.
it's only afterwards, and in that situation, it was afterwards, and I was debriefing, because other people came out, and I was like telling them what happened. Only then did it's like a dump, and I was like, oh, like I gotta sit down for a minute. Like I almost
Hmm.
shot somebody. Like that was crazy. Like first off, he almost stabbed me with a kitchen knife. Second, I almost shot him. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, and that's kind of how it was in the homicide world. When you're when in the heat of the investigation, you're so focused on getting the evidence that you need, getting what you need, dealing, and it's all sad, and dealing with the sadness, and even talking to the family, and they're emotional and they're crying, and you're trying to get information from them because you're trying to solve the case. It's only when it's all kind of solved and done that you sit back at your desk and kind of like, oh, like what am I doing? What if like this isn't normal? But then you kind of go into the mode again. You're like, okay, now I got to start writing this up. I got to get it ready for trial. And it's almost a robotic thing. It's almost like you just going along with like this is my job, and
Yeah.
I have to do a good job for them. I can't break down right now
Yeah.
because they need me. I got to get
Yeah.
this ready for trial, and we got to get this guy prosecuted because we got to help this family out because that was wrong what happened to them. So, and then when I left, I noticed right when I retired, after 20 years in Mesa, you can retire and get a pension. So
Mhm.
I left because I knew I was going to do other careers. I knew I was going to do other things.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I, I have a lot of other interests, and I will find something to do. And
Sure.
so I left, and I noticed almost right away, like after 6 months of leaving, my emotions evened out, and I just felt better. I just felt better. I was
You did.
sleeping more. Yeah, it really does, and it still affects you a little bit, but not as much. Removing you from the situation really does help. It really does help. So yeah, every police officer deals with bad things, and they all have the PTSD. It's just a matter of how they deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear. I was kind of, yeah, I kind of hope that the notion of therapy becomes, destigmatized to, people
Yeah,
in general, including macho men, because, and I actually think, and I was thinking while you were, describing everything that I think it's absolutely necessary to have a process for you or for any officer to, or anyone really, under intensity situations to be able to. There's a process and a line that I could turn to something and a clear set of instructions and of how to go about this, and so it's almost like there is an authority figure there in your head that's saying, this is what you do. He takes a step over that curb, you do this. When he does that, you do that. And I think that helps, I would imagine at least that helps the panic, the
yeah,
adrenaline rush, the I don't even know I don't even know. Like there was one time about a year ago now where I was driving my family back from Orlando to South Florida, and I was getting gas, and I mean, it was so stupid. I don't even remember what exactly what happened. There was a woman that was fighting with her boyfriend or whatever it was. They were like screaming, and she was like, "He's not letting me get out of the car, not letting me take my stuff." And please, someone help! And everyone was ignoring her. And I just started like taking a couple of steps over, like, "Is everything okay?" And I didn't have a plan. As I'm walking over, like my heart is like pounding, and I'm like, I have no idea what's gonna happen to me. I'm like, I can't not like say anything. Like no one's doing anything, and like I have a 1 year old, and so and this woman had a kid in the car, and I was like, I hope that like I don't know what's going on, but is everything okay? And I had no plan, and I was and I think that made the whole experience a lot more shaky, and then than to have here's a procedure and here's a step by step way to go. Um, what are some things you're going to pursue now? You wrote a couple of books I saw,
yeah.
which I
So
want to talk to you about.
real
Yes.
quick on that. So
Yeah.
how you explain that? So in all my training that I've had, it was explained the best. It was in the Secret Service, and the Secret Service guy explained it. Whereas he goes, in all of our trainings, we're giving you note cards in your head.
Mm-hmm.
He says, when you come on a situation that you've never done, He goes, you have a little monkey in your head that's going through the Rolodex and saying,
Mhm.
okay, it's like your situation. A girl needs help in a thing. If he goes through the Rolodex and there's nothing there, I don't I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
He goes, in training, we're filling your Rolodex. So
Yeah.
like, so that situation would be there. And that's kind of how it is. That's why in those training in training, they always say training will help officers. It will, because that way when you
Mhm.
show up to a scene, very rarely have I ever been involved in something. There's only a couple times where I've been involved in something where I've been like, I have no idea. Like this is
Yeah.
completely brand new to
What was
me.
that? What were those
The
contexts?
monkey is like going through things. One of them had a homicide. The gal said she was possessed by the devil. She said that she was ritual was done on her when she was 10 years old, and
Hmm.
that she was possessed by the devil, and she stabbed her sister-in-law over 270 times with a pair of scissors. And that one, like, I was getting ready to go in and do the interview, and I'm just like your face. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know. Like, this is all new to me. Like, what do I ask? So I just
What do
went in
you?
there. And so I straight up said, "Tell me about the possession." And she went into
What'd
great
she say?
detail. And she went into great detail. She said she had a fever. She was from Mexico, and she had a fever when she was 10 years old. And
Okay.
her grandmother was a bruja or a witch or something,
Sure.
and she did a possession on her to put a good spirit into her. And she said that worked for a year, but after a year, I started hearing voices to kill my family, and that I had learned that it was a spirit had pretended to be good, but it was a bad spirit in me. And she's lived with this for almost 20 years. And I'm like, well, what do you mean live with it? And she would tell me, like, oh, I got a job when I was 18. They came to America, and she's like, I got a job when I was 18, and I almost murdered my manager because I showed up to work and I was working at it was like a fast food restaurant. And she
Hmm.
said the voice said, you need to kill your manager or I'm going to hurt your family. And she's like, I almost did, but I convinced him that it was okay. And it's like, so that's kind of schizophrenic, but I'm not a psychologist. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
you
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, maybe this is a psychologist thing. But then I talked to the family, and the grandma confirmed it. I talked to grandma, and again, what do you ask grandma? So I just said, I'm going to ask her the truth. Did you do a ritual on your granddaughter when you were 10? She's like, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm a witch. My mother was a witch. I come from a long line of it, and and she like had the name of the spirit. She was like, put this spirit. This is his name, and she's like, I know it's a good spirit. She's just using this as an excuse because she thinks it's a bad spirit, but it's really a good spirit because it was all this spiritual
What the
and here's
heck
the
do
thing,
you? What do you make
I'm
of
a
that?
spiritual guy, so I kind of believe them. I believe that they believe it, and maybe it is true. Like, you know what I
Oh,
mean? Like, maybe it is true. Maybe she is possessed. And also, the courts found her to be mentally incompetent, so we couldn't. She's in a state hospital now, basically forever until she's able to stand trial, which I don't think she ever will be. Um,
did a
but yeah,
grandmother
that's
say
a
she
situation that they
moved the
can't
state?
train you for. Like, they can't train you for
Yeah.
demonology in the academy. You know what I mean? Because how often is that going to come out? So,
That's crazy. That's such a crazy story. And that scene must have been crazy.
yeah, it was weird. It was absolutely weird. And it was just weird doing the interview because you're like, I'm just gonna ask her directly, what's the name of the
What
demon?
do you have a hard time talking to murderers? Yeah, yeah. Is it hard to sit across from someone and know that they just killed someone and be like, how am I going to treat you like how am I going to treat you like a person?
Yeah. It's hard in the beginning, but that's where homicide detectives aren't just come straight out of the academy. That comes with years of interviewing people. Because you have to, like, I've interviewed a lot of people on the street, robbery people, rapists, things like that, and you
Oh,
can't
got
judge
it.
them. The minute you start judging them, they're going to shut down on you. So you do kind of have, and again, it's just doing a job. You know what I mean? Like, your job is to elicit a confession, or if not, elicit as much information as possible. And it's one of those things, the Rolodex, every interview you learn a new technique. So like a lot of times you would, with murderers, just make it like not a big thing. Like, okay, so, and then ask them, did you defend yourself? And some people are like, no, I didn't want to defend him. I just wanted to kill him. Well, why? Why would make you think? Do you think that's wrong? And just kind of have a conversation and not judge them. Because the minute you go in there and you start judging people and being like, you're a murderer, you're going to prison
Yeah.
forever, they're either going to be confrontational back or they're going to shut down. My experience is they usually shut down and say, I want a lawyer. You're not going to listen to me. But if you just like say, hey, I know a murder just happened. You're in a lot of trouble, but why? Like, tell
Yeah.
me your side of the story. I'm not gonna ask any questions. Just you talk and let me know Why did this go down? And they'll start from when they were 6 years old and talk for
Hmm.
40 minutes. But that's huge information. You have to listen because you're going to learn a lot. They'll tell you everything. You know what I mean? It may not be exactly how you want it. You're like, well, where'd you get the gun? I don't know. Because they probably don't know. Like, I just shot somebody. I'm having an adrenaline dump too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I'm
yeah.
in police custody. I'm a little worked up. I don't have those details, but we're like, no,
You're
I
saying
want to know right
those
now.
absurd you're saying those absurd Hollywood monologues actually happened in real life.
Yeah, they do. They actually do.
That's
They
crazy.
actually do. Yeah.
It's so
Everything
funny.
except
It's
for
my
like the
least favorite part of
yelling.
all the movies.
Pardon me?
Or it's the least favorite part of all those movies for me, or the monologues. I'm like, when does this actually ever happen? This is the first time I'm ever hearing of it actually happening in real life.
Yeah, oh, totally. I will tell you, if you most detectives and police officers and people in general, when they ask a question, they're not listening. They're already thinking about the next question that they're asking. I mean, we all do
Yeah.
it. I do it all the time. I've done it.
Right.
I admit I've done it while we're talking. You've said
Yeah,
things, and I've
me
been thinking
too.
in my mind. I want to talk about A-list actors with bad writing. You know what I mean?
Right. There we go.
So we all do it as human beings, but if we just step back and kind of say, hey, recognize that and acknowledge it and really listen to each other, you would be amazed at like I will ask people something and then they'll ask them something and they'll answer it and just their answer alone is very damning where you're like, whoa, did he just say that? And same thing where you just say, hey, you give me your side of the story. No judgment, no nothing. All right. But I'd always
Yeah.
tell them, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not your priest, I'm still a detective. I'm not going to
Yeah.
judge you, but you tell me why this went down. And you would be amazed most people will just say, okay, well, I felt disrespected and I felt wronged. And when I was 7, I was disrespected and I swore I would never do it again. And that's why I got a gun and I shot that guy because you're like, all right. Then you can get into the details, which sometimes they just don't want to tell you the details. Or again, they just don't remember because we as cops always forget that. And in movies, they always have these things where these criminals are masterminds, where there's these super
Hmm.
genius masterminds. Um, and that's not always the case. The masterminds we don't catch. I've always said this: we don't catch the smart ones. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you have the lions thing. Lions don't go to the center of the herd to get the zebra.
Yeah, pick
Lions
up the ones on the outside.
lions get the outside ones. The really really smart criminals we don't catch because they are smarter than us, or they're thinking.
Hmm.
They have the advantage. They straight up have the advantage. Um, but it is
Yeah,
interesting.
there was a great show. Have you ever watched Trafficked with Mariana Van Zeller?
No, I havened. I've
Oh,
heard
it's
of
a
it. I've heard of it, but I have not
it's on
watched it.
Hulu. It's on
Okay,
Hulu.
okay.
She's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a bunch of times. I think every time she records a new season. But one thing that she does is, I mean, she basically each episode is a particular aspect of crime that she's doing investigative journalism on.
Oh,
And so it's the fentanyl crisis, it's mail order brides, it's illegal street fighting. And each episode is something incredible. And one thing that she does super, super well is also that no judgment, just like, why'd you do that? Like, what do you, and so one thing, there's an episode where she was talking to assassins in, I think, South Africa. And this guy got into assassinations or becoming a hitman because, because his dad was killed or something like that.
yeah.
And she said to him, have you ever thought about the fact that you're putting some other kid in that same situation? And the guy's like, no, I never thought about that in my entire life. He's like, and then apparently she came up to him afterward. He came up to her after they finished rolling and said, I really you changed the way that I perceive things. And I don't know if he was necessarily even happy about that because that's his livelihood, right? But he
Yeah.
was like, like I look at this guy like he's a bad guy and I got to make a living and I don't care what it is. And he's like, I never thought about the fact that he as a kid that was feeling the exact same way that I felt. And
Yeah.
and so just having these conversations a lot of time is just like you wouldn't even imagine, but I guess it works.
No, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds
Yeah,
really
you
interesting.
should. And it also makes me question. I feel like the idea that people talk to like a person, um, is pretty well known. It has been pretty well known for a long time, and so it really, really astonishes me when we hear stories about like people try, especially stories in our government, unfortunately, about times where we torture people for information. We're like, don't we know like beforehand that that's a bad method? Like, don't you know that that's not a good idea? Who told you that you thought you were going to get a good information, you know?
No, and that's absolutely right. And I learned that as a patrol officer. My FTO taught me, and then I taught it to newer officers. And I
Hmm.
always said, if you're dealing with a homeless person, if you want to get compliance, call them sir or ma'am. And I will tell you, you ask a person like, sir, can I just ask you, like a homeless person loitering out front of a store and they call you, right? And they call the police. That's a regular police story. If you show up there, these are already people in society who have nothing to lose. They've already lost everything. They're in the
Hmm.
worst possible situation. Yelling at them is not going to make them any better or any happier.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And just like you were saying, they're probably anti-defiant, so they're probably going to say, I'm not going to listen to you anyway. If
Hmm.
you treat people with respect, I always call everybody sir and ma'am. If you come up there and say, sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a call. And I've had some people say, hey, you called me sir. You seem like a decent guy. What do you want me to do? They just don't want you here. Okay, I'll leave. You know what I mean? Some
Yeah.
of them still aren't going to be that way. But same thing. I've had so many people where have just said, even people who are known criminals and gang members, and they have the F the police tattoo on their neck, and I call him sir. And there's one guy who's an old time Mexican mafia guy, gangster, and he was a robber. He robbed a bank, and I was interviewing him, and he had F the police on his neck. He clearly did not like police, and I called him sir the whole time. And as I'm walking into jail, he actually said, "Thanks for treating me with respect and dignity. I appreciate it." He's like,
Yeah.
"If I see you on the street, I'd probably try to kill you," but he goes, "I appreciate you being cool with me." And I'm like, "Hey, sir, you're a human being, and I appreciate you, and I wish you the best of luck." You're right. I always found being nice to people, it gets you way further. Some folks you just can't be nice with because they're going to try to kill you.
Or-
Like the guy that's trying to stab me with a knife. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my niceness was only going so far,
Sure.
But 98% of the time, you're absolutely right. If we just talk to people and be nice and show a little respect, they may show some respect back.
Yeah, yeah. So what's coming up for you? So actually, before you tell me what's coming up, I wanted to ask you about the process of writing a book,
Okay,
or
yeah,
writing multiple books,
yeah,
because I was a creative writing and literature major in college, and I came to the realization very quickly that I'm never going to write a book, or very unlikely to write a book, because I have a very, very hard time keeping one overarching concept in my head and then breaking it down into a lot of different chapters and ideas and stuff like that. It's really, really hard for me. I'm not good at writing. I'm good at writing short form fiction
yeah,
and poetry and everything.
yeah.
But tell me about what your strategy came to, was when it comes to writing, and what your goals were and what you wrote about.
Okay, so I wrote a book. So when I first got out, so I wrote a book called On
Yes.
Call,
Yes.
Case
I'll put
Files.
the link in the show note caption for
Awesome,
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
So it kind of came. I never thought. Again, I just kind of fell into it because I never really thought about writing a book. But when we were doing doing our crime scenes, you're tired, and I remember thinking, like, I'm tired and I'm stressed, and this kind of sucks. But there's so many people in this world that this is an interesting job. Like I have an interesting job. Not many
Yeah.
people get to say they're homicide detectives. So it was kind of almost like a morale booster for me at times, where it's like instead of being a Debbie Downer and saying, um, like, oh, woe is me, and this is sucky, and this is bad. Hey, I'm doing something that a lot of people would probably want to be involved in. And then
Hmm.
my wife loves watching those true
True
crime
crime.
TV shows, and I'm always watching them, and I'm like, that's not how it goes. Like they miss because like they always say like, okay, so this murder happened, and then we went and we knocked on this guy's door and we got him in custody, and I'm like, they missed something because
Yeah.
they went from A to Z, and they didn't tell us anything in the middle. Like that's not how it works. So I kind of started getting the idea in my head of like, it would be, I think people would be really interested to see how they really unfold and how sometimes it's really clean, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes it's really not. Like sometimes
Hmm.
you spend a lot of time looking for the wrong person only to realize they're the wrong person and have to go right back to the beginning and start from scratch. Or
Hmm.
you're biased. And that was I talk about that in the book about not being biased. And I show some examples of how my bias affected the direction I was going. And once I said, "Hey, you got to stop that. Let's go
Yeah.
back to logic and facts and reason," and it led me in a direction that led me to the truth.
Hmm.
So I was like, I think people would be interested in that. So I retired in 2021, and then about a month after retirement, it was actually a person I used to work with in the Secret Service was a subject matter expert for textbooks, and they wanted more subject matter experts for textbooks. So they
Cool.
contacted me. So for my first year off of in retirement, I was a subject matter expert writer for two criminal justice textbooks that they use in college right now. And I wrote
Nice.
PowerPoints and also scenarios. So, they were like, we want a scenario where you have to use, or there's an exception to the search warrant or the search rule, or a Terry pat down example. So I would use real life examples. You're a cop and you're walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning and you see a hand to hand, and then you see somebody lighting up drugs, can you approach them? So I did that. And that's when I started learning about the academic world. And I started seeing that academic policing and real life policing are two different things,
Mhm.
because you can read it in a textbook, but it doesn't happen that way in real life. And again, on the homicide thing. So then I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I wrote the first draft. I pitched it to some publishers. They liked it, but they didn't like the content too much. So I actually got a professional editor who gave me some really good ideas to
Mhm.
include callouts. The published book actually has callouts, so it explains. It's almost like a textbook. Um, as we talk about search warrants and physical characteristics and things like that, there's actually little callouts in there that tell you exactly what they are. So, like on the side of the book, like this one's about firearm technology. So this one we're talking about firearms, and then over
Yeah.
here we'll talk about the actual terminology that you'll use,
Cool.
like casing,
Nice.
fired cartridges, stippling, things like that. So little things that you can learn, that the true crime reader can learn and be more educated. So with that, I did a complete rewrite. I kept the old draft. It's all digital now, but I kept the old draft. But I
Mhm.
basically started from scratch and rewrote the whole thing.
Wow.
And just like you, I don't sit still well. So I decided that each chapter was going to be about 20 to 30 pages and cover one case. So you could
Cool.
sit in one sitting and read, because also not a lot of people have time to sit and read a 300-page book about one case. You're going to
Uh-huh.
walk away from it for a couple days and you're going to lose track of what's going on. So each
Sure.
chapter, there's 11 chapters that cover 13 cases, and that case is broken down from the call out, meaning the first time that you're called out as a detective, all the way to prosecution and sentencing. So let me
Mhm.
break it down in 25 pages, and each chapter talks about a legal aspect. I talk about jury selection. I talk about testifying.
Cool.
I talk about
Mhm.
search warrants, making photo lineups, how photo lineups are good, how photo lineups are bad, the
Cool.
difference in crimes. Everybody always, if somebody breaks in your house, you always say, "I got robbed." Actually, you did. You got burgled. So I explained, robbery is where somebody takes something from your person by force. Burglary is
Okay.
if they take something from your property by force. But even the media
Mhm.
is like, oh, there was a robbery. Not a robbery. That's a burglary. So
Yeah.
I'm trying, because I wanted people to be knowledgeable and educated, and also
Mhm.
question what they hear and see both in the news and on TV, and question it and say, okay, they're saying this, but what really happened on the back end? Like, what did they really
Right.
have on there? And don't just take what you're told for fact, because sometimes we're just told things. So after the full rewrite, and so then a publisher liked it, they published it, and it was about a 2.5 year process for writing the book,
Wow.
and I
Wow.
really enjoyed it, and it
You
was
enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. It was
Wow.
fun. As for my writing style, I kind of tried to write it like a police report almost. Um,
Cool.
I tried to write it like it's. I wanted it to be for true crime readers, but also for younger detectives, because as you're growing up in the detective world, like when I became a beer run detective, that's
Mhm.
because there's no detective school. You have a recruit academy to be an officer. There's no academy for being a detective. You have to
Mhm.
learn as you go. So
Yeah.
by the time you become a homicide detective, you test into it. You have to have a good reputation. You have to have a knowledge of it. You can't be brand new and go to homicide, because you're just not going to know it. This is
Yeah.
kind of a little bit of a learning tool, where if somebody's interested in doing that as a career, or in the career and interested in doing violent crime, homicide, or complex investigations, it gives them an idea of kind of things that I did. And I really focus on, it's 50-50 of my successes and my failures. I
Nice.
really focus on it because I did things where I thought out of the box. I'm like, I'm thinking out of the box. I'm smarter than everybody. Let's do this.
Mhm.
And it totally didn't work. And I want to
Yeah.
let people know that, because it might
Yeah.
work in your case, but it didn't work in
Good for
mine. And
you.
other times where I
And
think out of the
that's
box
awesome.
and it worked. And it's like,
Mhm.
and everybody goes, wow, I didn't even think about that. Like, yeah, I literally just thought of it. So
So can I? I guess I want to actually ask your thoughts on two, I guess, recent and very famous, scenarios. I guess that you'd probably
Okay.
have experienced both in. First of all, the last year when Trump got shot at, um, and I get. I know that the Secret Service got grilled for that.
Yeah.
Would that have been part of the field work that would have been responsible for to see the different potential positions that people could have been entering? And if so, were they held responsible, or should they have, or what would you have done differently about that, or from your experience, what went right or wrong about that?
Yeah. So I was not in the Secret Service at the time. I have no inside knowledge on it at all.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Just
and I
speculation. I'm
also
sorry, just
never
for
did
speculation.
advances for that kind of stuff. But what I would say is that on from my perspective as having been in those events,
Yeah.
that was a lapse in the advance. So when a president goes somewhere or any dignitary goes somewhere, they'll do an advance where they'll say, "Hey, we need this kind of resource. So we need a cop here. We need a cop here. This is going to be the entry point. These are the vehicles
Hmm.
we're going to stay at." They would even plan like if something bad happens, this is the airport we're going to. This is the
Sure.
hospital we're going to. All of that. What I saw when I saw that, and I watched it on the news like everybody else, and I was also kind of enthralled in it because it was my own thing. That was a huge lapse of um, communication, I think, and advanced planning. Because I still am not clear as a citizen who was responsible for watching that roof. Because
Hmm.
the Secret Service said, oh, that was the locals, and the locals are saying that was Secret Service. So
Yeah.
clearly they were not communicating. You know what I mean? So I
Not
think
too
that,
quick to take credit now,
yeah,
huh?
I think it was poor communication. I think it was poor planning. And I also think complacency.
Yeah.
When I was in the Secret Service, we were also very complacent. And right after I left in February of 2001, September 2020 of 2001, 9/11 happened.
Sure.
And talking to people that I had been in the Secret Service, and I was in the PD at the time, the local PD, but I would talk to my friends that were still in, and they had said it changed. Like no more, sleeping on duty or things like that, because it was very complacent. Nothing was ever happened. So when I
Yeah.
was in, no one had ever tried. The last attempt on a president's life, serious attempt, was Reagan, and that was in the
Right.
80s. So that had
Right.
been almost 18, 19 years
Yeah.
since anything had happened, and people get complacent. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's what happened here, is they were thinking it's Pennsylvania, it's small town Pennsylvania. Everybody loves Trump. He's not
Hmm.
really any danger. No one's going to shoot him. You know what I mean? Like we
Right.
don't think that. But
Right.
unfortunately, in the protective world, you have to think worst case scenario. Your little
Yeah.
remember the Rolodex and the monkey has to go. Ooh, guy on the rooftop shooting. And I think so now for the next 10, 15 years, that's all they'll focus on is rooftops.
Sure.
Especially
Sure.
with that
Yeah.
and the Charlie Kirk thing, they'll focus on rooftop. But then some criminal will figure another thing out that we didn't think of. And then we're going
Hmm.
to have to add that Rolodex in there again and go, oh, now we got to think about this. Before 9/11, we never thought about airplanes into a building. Nobody ever
Right.
thought about that. That wasn't a thing. If you mentioned that, you'd be like, I don't even think it's even possible. Like or that's something you see in a movie. Like no one's going to do that.
Hmm.
So that's kind of
Yeah.
my thing on that is I think it was really lack of complacency, lack of planning, and like I said, as a private citizen who watched it, I still am not clear who was supposed to be watching that rooftop, and I don't think they were either. I think
Yeah.
everybody else kind of had that thing of like, oh, that's their responsibility. I'm going to focus on this, and
Yeah.
it,
The
it,
other thing I
it
was thinking, the other thing I was thinking about that was also, and I forgot where I heard this from recently. It was probably a TV show or a movie or something. Or no, maybe it was a book. But it was that we don't know all the right times that they've stopped hundreds or thousands of attempts, because they don't publicize it very
yes,
often, unless it's
yeah,
unless it's happened in such a public way that it gets reported on, right? But I
yes,
mean, if the agents do their job the right way, they can eliminate the threat before anyone even knows about it, and then they don't want anyone to know about it because they don't want to hear about how they caught it, how they caught the person,
yes,
that they're trying
no,
to perpetrate it. So the other thing is like, we give them a very, very hard time, but we have no idea how many thousands of other situations had occurred leading up to that, or in the previously been assessed or acted on, that may have led that someone to act differently because of their previous experience they thought had would have been successful. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just something else that came to mind. And the second question was also, I guess, and that this would be more about your homicide experience. Was it Charlie Kirk? I was going to ask about that.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of your thoughts? Because and I I'm not a conspiracy nut by any stretch of the imagination, although I hear some of them out and kind of try to do my own homework on some of them, and I don't know what to make of any of it, other than just how terrible it is. But did you have any thoughts or observations as it was happening, or anything since then?
I haven't really been paying a lot to the conspiracy. I remember I watched it when it first happened, and I remember when it first happened, there was that really close-up video
Hmm.
on YouTube or TikTok, one of the two. And I remember
Yeah.
I downloaded the video and I went frame by frame like I used to do in the old days,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
went frame by frame, and I could tell that as a homicide detective, when I saw that shot, they were like, "Oh, he's in the hospital," and one news report was like, "Oh, he's stay." I'm like, I don't think that's a survivable shot.
Yeah.
That was a really bad place. That's a bad place to get shot in the
Uh-huh.
neck. Um, and again, and the conspiracy theories, I haven't heard a whole lot of them because I kind of don't buy some of the conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I, I kind of don't. And I know, like, he was asked a question about either a shooter or a mass shooting
Hmm.
something, and then the shot came off. But for that to happen, do you realize, and being a firearms person, it's hard to shoot somebody anyway, right? It's
Hmm.
hard, and even though the guy had a hunting rifle and it wasn't that hard of a shot, it still takes a little bit of um, concentration.
Sure.
But to place a shot right when somebody says to shoot,
Yeah.
and then actually making that shot, that's like
Yeah.
Navy SEAL type stuff, right? And this
Yeah.
guy is
Yeah. Yeah.
no Navy SEAL. He was a hunter who had a little bit of hunting experience with that rifle, and he shot somebody with that rifle. So I don't necessarily buy that.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't. I'm not. I don't. I'm not. But convinced of much. It has to be like one of those things where it's a very clear correlation or connection, and then there's just absolutely no response for me to be like, how come there's no response? But like this
yeah.
doesn't. That did not seem like a
So let me ask you,
particularly.
what makes you think there's a conspiracy? Is it because there's not a lot of information available?
I think so. I think
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
And apparently there was a gag order just placed on like
Yeah.
several thousand people, which is also a little strange. And again, maybe it's not a conspiracy. Maybe, by the way, it's just a case that they're working on. And cases are really hard to, one of when my students were asking me, like, how'd they get the wrong guy? And I'm like, if I was like, you don't understand. You're going to be in college in a couple of years, guys. You're gonna have a guy come to your campus that's considered, controversial, and you're gonna go with your friends and drink a lot of beer and hang out and maybe smoke a J, and then you're gonna go with the whole crowd of people and watch them fight with people, and you're gonna be like, this is a great time. And then I was like, and then something happens, and everyone's panicking. I was like, who's a reliable witness? Who recounts what they saw? Who's paying any attention to anything going on over there? And maybe it's just that there's so much information, and there's such little accurate, accounting of what's going on, that's just really hard to find. I'm
Yeah.
not sold any way on anything other than just it was a tragedy.
Yeah. And a lot of times I think the gag order, so arresting that one dude, first off, I mean, you can't blame local police because at first I was like, well, why would they arrest him? But apparently he started yelling out, like,
I
I
did
did
it.
it, I did it.
Yeah.
You can't, as a cop, just be like, no, you didn't, and just walk away. Like, you're a crazy dude. No, you didn't. No, you'd pounce on him, put him in handcuffs, even though
Yep.
more than likely he didn't do it. Like, he doesn't have a rifle. He's right there. I mean, but yeah, as a responsible, like, I think
Yeah.
most people would understand, you can't just walk away from that guy and go away, crazy man. So they're
Yeah.
focusing on getting him in custody. The gag order, I can see. A lot of times we try cases in the media and in the social world before they
Hmm.
even go to trial. And I think they're from the gag order, in my perception, is they're trying to stop that. But
I
when you
see.
do that, it does seem like they're hiding something. I'm not even going to lie.
Yeah.
And the conspiracy. When I was in the military, I was really big on the JFK conspiracy,
Okay.
and all those books had just come out. JFK, the movie, just came out, and I remember when I was in the
Hmm.
military, I read all the books, and I was convinced the CIA and the mob did it, and this and that. And then as I got older and I read more to it and I started seeing it, I went to Dealey Plaza once on vacation. When I saw where all of it happened, and you're kind of like, maybe he did just do it. You know what I mean? It's really odd and weird, but maybe he did. And then it comes out they released all the files, and everybody's kind of like, yeah, it looks like he probably did it on his own. Were there things
Right.
behind the scenes? Maybe, but yeah, I think sometimes we want things to be bigger than they are,
Hmm.
and not just realize that sometimes, like this Charlie Kirk situation, that guy had the perfect opportunity at the perfect moment, was able to get into the perfect spot, make a shot that was, everybody says it was, oh, that's an easy shot. I've shot it 200 yards even with the rifle. It's kind of easy, but it's not. If you've never handled a gun, you're not doing it. You got to have a
Hmm.
little bit. And you're shooting another human being. You're stressed. You're thinking about, am I going to get caught? Am I going to get that? So you got to add the stress factor on there as well. So that was
Probably on some
still
kind of
a,
drug. You're probably drugged up in some sort of way.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Imagine, you
So
know.
it was, there was a lot of things that went on that guy's side that make that come true.
Hmm.
So I don't know. And like I
Yeah.
said, is there a I kind of try to stay away from the conspiracies because everything turns into a conspiracy because we think everybody's lying to us. And if you think everybody's lying to us, then you really have to start wondering, what do I believe on anything? And then we just start
Right.
believing from people that we want to believe, and then we're biased on that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
I
becomes
don't
a
know.
lot harder. Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's what makes that's why you got to do a lot of these things per diem almost, But like,
Yeah.
the question of do are any conspiracy theories real? It's like, well, you think the government's 100% telling the truth on everything that's ever happened,
Oh,
in the last
no,
100 years? You're like, well, probably not 100%, So of the ones that they are, which ones is true and which one's not? And I actually think that um to be able to, and it's never ever going to happen, but like in this hopelessly romantic, world, or this idealistic world where people would say, hey, you know what? We did it. We screwed up. There's accountability. This person's in jail. This person's fired. This person, loses their classification. Will never go, step foot into public service again. And then you say, now do we now elicit trust? Like we say,
yeah,
now we are now we're standing, but I think that what gets a lot of people frustrated is the feeling of being gaslit or being told no, 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 no,
yeah.
and so then that's when the slippery slope kind of starts happening. It's hard, but it's also like you said, once you don't know who to believe, you don't believe, you become biased, and you just start thinking everything about everyone, and it's like, okay, forget about it. I'm
I've
sorry.
seen
Yeah.
from experience, media and people with or with a public voice will
Hmm.
make a statement that is absolutely not true, that is straight up not true, but they have a voice. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
people believe them, so they
Hmm.
believe that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I always bring up the thing of um, um, the George Floyd murder. When it first
Hmm.
happened, they mentioned excited delirium. And I remember watching a news thing where they said excited delirium isn't a thing. It's a made up word and it's not a thing.
Hmm.
And regardless of the whole George Floyd thing, I remember hearing that
Right.
and thinking, no, it's not, because police officers have been trained in it. Like we have had
Hmm.
hours and hours and hours of training. Excited delirium is a real thing. But I was watching these people, and there's like three experts, and they're all saying, no, excited delirium isn't a thing. It's proven in court not to be a thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, they're wrong. It
Yeah.
is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
nobody's going to listen to me. At the time I was a detective, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
anything. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, you believe you. You know what I mean? Let the courts figure out. So that was an example where I saw for certain that people had no idea what they were talking about, and
Sure.
then saying it. And I'm sure it happens a lot because I don't know everything, and people say things that I believe because I trust them,
Hmm.
but I don't do the research on it. You know what I mean? And maybe I should.
Yeah.
Maybe I should be Googling more of like, hey, is this real? And then you
Yeah.
got to wonder, is that real? So if you go down the conspiratorial thing, it just goes forever and ever and ever. But I think that's a big thing. Is a
Uh,
lot of
From experience, it does, and you have to pull yourself out of it before it drives you nuts.
I think we always have to remember this: is that we think everything is a conspiracy, and I think more than likely it's incompetence. There's a lot of
Yes.
people. I've met a lot of politicians, and I've met a lot of people in power and things like that. And I will say, not all of them are competent people.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
not all politicians are good people. There are politicians who are. I've met them. They are bad people, and but they get elected, and that's the thing. That's fine. That's their job. But I think we have to stop taking everybody just because we see it on a podcast and go, oh,
Yes. Yep.
That's the
Yep.
truth. And then
Yep.
you watch another
Yep.
podcast and go, okay, now that's the truth.
Yeah.
Think for ourselves a little bit, and we
Sure.
have the world at our fingertips with AI and Google and the internet, whatever you use. We have the world at our fingertips. We should be our own detectives and figure our own stuff out and maybe listen to ourselves because we're not all experts. We're
Yeah.
not all experts on everything.
Right. Right. It reminds me of what do you call it? That scene. Do you remember in Cheers when Woody Harrelson runs for office, uh, and he wins by saying all the wrong things.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
like, yeah, okay, well, there you go. Anyway, Justin, I really appreciate your time. This was such a fun and fascinating conversation, and this has really been really informative and a lot of fun. And I really appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
thank you
I
so
really
much.
appreciate talking to you. It was a lot of
Thank you
fun.
for all the
Hopefully,
service and all the great work throughout the years. This really means a lot, and I wish you lots of luck. Hopefully, be in touch, and I'm very excited to hear about what you got coming up next. Okay.
yes, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right. Take care. Bye bye now.